Welcome to episode 6 of Our Sabbatical Story.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
I was just going to introduce myself. My name's Rachel and I'm here with my husband Luke.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
And we are documenting our first ever sabbatical experience over these special 8 episodes. And so we're going to dive right in.
Sounds good.
Because people can catch up anytime they like on the past 5 episodes.
Yep.
That have gotten us to where we are today. And today we are talking about a part of our sabbatical where we took an overseas trip to Thailand. So let's just give everybody a bit of insight into how and why we planned to be in Phuket, Thailand for 10 nights towards the back end of the sabbatical. Can you even remember?
I do know why we were there. We have been celebrating our anniversary, our
wedding anniversary,
I think marriage anniversary, our wedding anniversary with some kind of break away for a few years to different places. We had planned, the last few years we had planned to and had gone away to somewhere like Thailand. And so where else have we been? We've been to Thailand a few times, haven't we?
Yes. One year we went to Fiji.
Yeah, Fiji. End of COVID, that's right.
Couldn't fly to Queensland, but we could fly to Fiji. We were on the second plane out of the country.
We were allowed to fly to Fiji, and it was also like half the price to fly to Fiji and have a few days there than what it would have been to drive to Queensland.
That's accurate, but we weren't allowed to cross the border into Queensland.
So we just said, let's go. But we've been doing that for a while.
Well, I mean, to be fair, we've basically our whole married life, around our anniversary, we've tried to do something special. And in the early years of our marriage, when we were very young and very poor, that would look like one night away in a hotel somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then for our 20th wedding anniversary a few years ago, we were like, right, let's treat ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big achievement to get to 20 years of marriage. And that was the first time we went to Thailand, actually. And then after that, we were like, hey, we should do this every year. We're a bit older now. Our kids are a bit older. We should invest the time and money each year to do something a bit special that helps build our marriage.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying why we're having a break.
I'm just giving a bit more of my own perspective.
Yeah, and so because we planned to have this sabbatical break, we brought our usual anniversary holiday forward to the end of the sabbatical, just so we could maximise that time and have the 8 weeks in one block. So that's what we did. So we just tacked it on toward the end of the holiday, toward the end of the sabbatical, to have a anniversary holiday, and that's why, and that's what.
But we went to Phuket because we've never actually stayed in Phuket before. We've been to other parts of Thailand. And we went there for 10 nights, which ended up being quite long. But do you want to explain why?
Too long. Well, we had planned to do something new. Part of the whole sabbatical planning process was to consider doing something that you have never done before, learning a new skill, having a new experience, doing a new activity together. And so we thought, let's try scuba diving and go and get our license, our scuba diving license, our PADI license. So we planned to do that, and that's why we had an extended time in Thailand, because we need to have a buffer at the end of your scuba diving experience, because you aren't supposed to fly and be at altitude. It messes with your head if you've been exposed to different kinds of pressure underwater, etc. So we said, yeah, great, let's just make this a slightly extended break, give us time to do our scuba diving PADI license. But unfortunately the weather was pretty terrible, and which meant that was prohibitive for us to do the license. So we didn't do that, which meant that we had a little extra time in Thailand, which I think was probably more than we needed, to be honest. And I also think it was more than we needed because we had already had such a long, once-in-a-lifetime extended break. So then we were like, having a break we would normally have like at the end of a busy year, and our normal anniversary in November, it's kind of like great, like it's almost needed, it's almost like the perfect timing, and it's But this was not. It was very unusual to have that experience. So yeah, it did feel like a long time.
Well, that was one of our reflections, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Normally, because our anniversary falls at the end of November, if we take some leave around that time, end of November, start of December, it's the end of the year. You haven't had a holiday for a while. You're feeling pretty wound up. So you go to somewhere like a relaxing resort in Thailand, and it takes you a couple of days to wind down. And we get a few days into this, the longest time we've ever been away.
We're wound down already.
And we were already wound down. We're like, and then we couldn't scuba dive.
Had no reason to get wound back up again.
So that was a funny experience.
Yeah, but I think it also meant that boredom's sometimes seen as something that you should try and avoid, but a lot of the research that we are seeing today, particularly because of the overstimulation, hyperactive manner in which we live our lives, this boredom is almost like a superpower, and so to be put into that place was actually really good for us and helped us to be really creative about some things that we hadn't actually planned to really get into the weeds of while we were away in Thailand. But we're like, okay, well, we're here. We kind of we're chilled. Let's do some of this big thinking kind of stuff. So, I don't know if you want to talk about what some of those things were. And it's the kind of thing, like this whole sabbatical thing, it is one of the big, like the bedrocks of the sabbatical experience is setting aside time to plan about the big parts of your life long term. That's one of the bedrocks of the whole sabbatical experience.
Yeah. So going back to what you were saying before, like we say to our kids often that, creativity is birthed out of boredom. So when our kids come to us and say that they're bored, we're like, that's great, because now you're at a place where there's enough time and space in your brain and your thinking to start to be creative.
Yeah, they don't tell us they're bored much anymore.
And so we experienced a little bit of that ourselves. So we might get into that in a minute. I think what I'm hearing you say and what we've reflected on already is that it meant that we realised we were in a good place to be able to start to have some of the creative conversations we knew had to happen at some point towards the end of the sabbatical. And we were wound down enough now to start to broach some of those. We were kid-free because we were on this overseas holiday. There was not a lot to do. The weather was bad. So, it was a perfect storm of now is the time to start to have some of these big conversations. But before we get to that, can you remember any just highlights without going into like the deep thinking stuff? Like, can you remember any of the highlights of that trip?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the themes of our whole sabbatical break is the surprising elements, the things that we hadn't planned to do. We just kind of stumbled across that became the most, the most memorable. Pardon me. One of them was watching the Matildas, the Aussie female soccer team, play in the quarterfinal of the World Cup in Phuket. Well, we were watching it on the TV screen in a bar in Phuket. We were trying to find a way to watch it. The internet at the resort was terrible. We couldn't watch anything international on our device because we were overseas, and so we kind of thought it would be shown somewhere in Phuket because of all the Aussie bars and stuff that are there. And so one night we just went in there, and one afternoon we went down to the main strip, and it was showing you one of the bars, so it was really fun. So because there was a guy there that was
I don't think it was the quarterfinal, but it was the Aussie versus France, Australia versus France match, wherever that was in the World Cup. And
so there was a French guy there, and there was a couple of Aussies there, and we were kind of just sat in the back of the bar a little bit. But by the end of the game, actually the funniest thing is we thought we'd missed the game because we'd mapped out the timing, and we were like, we're going to get this bus into town. The game's going to be over. We'll just see, if we catch the tail end of it. Yeah. So anyway, it turned out to be the game that went into overtime, that went into the penalty shootout.
Yeah.
And so the whole
for 100 years.
So it went for like an extra 30 minutes. So we basically got to the point of the soccer match that you want to watch, the fun bit. So, and then the whole street was like, and we could hear other bars, like they were yelling and screaming and cheering where we were, that the French guy was up on his feet when the Aussies missed a goal or if they scored one, a penalty shootout. So, yeah, for me, that was one of the highlights, just a bit of a rant. And again, that's all just surprising. Like, who would have thought that we'd be there? We would have been able to catch the end of the game. We would have been there in the bar with some French guy dancing around Yahoo and carrying on. So that was pretty fun. What about you?
I mean, I think that was probably my highlight too.
Oh, sorry, did I steal it?
Well, no, because as you were saying it, I was thinking, were there any other highlights? I mean, it was just little things. There was a great buffet breakfast, and because I think also because we were in that one resort for such a long time, and we spent a lot of time in the resort. Not going and doing other things because of the no scuba diving, we kind of had enough time to build connection with some of the staff and, feel like a bit of the, furniture for a little while.
Yeah, it was almost like they were saying, like, when are you leaving? It's like, why are you still here? Every turn up for breakfast every morning, they'd have a funny look on their face like, oh, you're still here. Oh, when do you leave? It's like, oh, yeah, we're still leaving in another 3 or 4 days. Oh, right. Yeah. And then they'd see us again. Oh, so we knew them all by name and so that was fun.
And there were some low lights too,
Yeah.
We wanted to stay in Phuket because we've never stayed in Phuket before. We've arrived into Phuket airport before and then driven up to, Khao Lak, one of the other resort places, which we really love. But we got to, I guess, see a bit of the side of Phuket that...
Yeah, the dark underbelly.
Yeah, just, makes you aware of how people live and, it's... I find it sad, my reflection was feeling a bit sad about even hearing people at the breakfast buffet.
Oh, that's right.
Talk about
overhearing them.
Talk about their hijinks the night before and seeing girls dancing in the street and all of that kind of stuff. Just, I think it's really good for us to experience.
Oh yeah,
those things.
It was certainly just a reminder that there's a lot of broken people in the world.
Yeah,
both from here, like from Australia, but also people in Thailand who are there and just trying to survive and trying to make it and trying to do their best for their kids and their family. And it's just it's obviously hard work and it was just quite shocking. I guess
confronting. I think, which then that forces me to self-reflect because then I kind of wanted to just hang out in the resort. I didn't really want to be confronted with some of what I was seing. I
mean, it makes you grateful for organisations that are kind of on the cutting edge or doing real work to help young girls in countries like that to be rescued from.
Or to have options.
Just have an option. Obviously they grow up thinking this is the way we do things around here, but there are other options. And so, so it was, I mean, you obviously it's there in the back of your mind, even when you visit other countries like that, but then when you see it, so it's a saturated experience. Like you're immersed in it all the time. Whenever you leave the resort, it's like, okay, this is the real world for a lot of people. This is their everyday. It's like, wow, this would not be, what you would want for your family. Yeah, so it was quite confronting.
Well, to get into some of the deep stuff, my journal reflection from this part of the sabbatical starts with this sentence. See if you can remember what this is referring to.
Oh, good. Trivia. Go.
Sentence 1 from sabbatical week 6 and 7. There was nearly a disaster this morning.
Hang on. Was it to do with the flight?
No.
Were we in Phuket?
Yes.
There was nearly a disaster this morning.
Just imagine me. I'm writing this on my journal, on my MacBook.
Yes, that's right. Was it you thought
you're not giving me a lot of confidence that you accurately remember.
No, was it that you thought that you deleted your entire journal?
Yes.
Yeah, like 7 or 6 weeks worth of content plus.
Well, not only that, my whole year, because I've got this one document.
Yeah, that's
for the
right. I remember that.
Year.
I felt like I was the superhero that day.
I felt like you were the superhero.
somehow found
never
it.
loved you as much.
I somehow found it, and I think it was a miracle, to be honest, because I tried a few things and I tried them again just because I was filling in time to try and make it look like I was actually helping you because you were so distraught about it. And literally doing the same thing again worked, which is not how computers work. So I reckon it was an absolute miracle because like I plumbed the depths of my recovery knowledge, data recovery skills, and then did it again and it worked. So who knows?
Well, I've actually journaled that as well because after the crisis was averted and you described it as a miracle, which I take on board because you're my tech support, and I've written there that because I'm trying not to panic. Luke began to do a deep dive to try and find out what had happened to recover the document.
Yeah, it was everywhere, all across the internet.
Here lies all my thoughts, feelings and experiences, not only from this once-in-a-lifetime sabbatical experience, but from this whole year. It's a document in a series now spanning several years where I've intentionally put my thoughts, feelings and experiences into words on digital paper in the hope it will provide either stimulus for other future writing or at the very least a part of the legacy I leave the future generations of my family.
So when you publish it into a book, I should get the royalties, is what you're saying?
Well,
Thank
I began to pray.
Thank you.
I began to process the idea that the document could be completely lost.
Ooh, you have to let it go.
While trying to hold out hope that it could still be recovered in some form.
You have to release it.
I quietly waited while Luke worked. And went to a different activity, continuing my reading and handwritten reflections on the book of Deuteronomy. So here's the thing that I had forgotten, because then once you got it back and you did describe it as a miracle, I've said I cried with relief, which is true.
I remember you sobbing in the middle of the cafe.
We were sitting in a cafe in the resort.
Sobbing. You were sobbing. And I was just awkward. But also quite, proud of myself. And thankful to God and saying, should I say this is a miracle, God, or should I just take all the credit for this?
I was so grateful all was not lost. Here's what I've written. I was literally reading in Deuteronomy 8, the warning from Moses to the people of God not to take for granted God's goodness when you come into the land of prosperity and blessing. Mm-hmm. And here I was experiencing it for myself. I had just read Moses' reminder to the people that their clothes and shoes had not worn out in the 40 years of wilderness wandering, and that these were literal miracles of God's provision for them to remember in a time when blessing and prosperity would be all around them. And here was Luke telling me in all his tech knowledge and understanding, he actually couldn't understand why and how this document had just suddenly appeared where it had when he saw it.
Yeah, totally. I don't know if you know anything about technology out there, people, but it was completely gone. It's not there. And then it was.
And isn't it... I mean, we'll get to this in 2 episodes' time, but even just as I read this before we started recording this episode, a few weeks down the path, like it was like the Holy Spirit was re-inspiring me to hold on to that position of prosperity and not take for granted God's goodness and provision that's all around, and be reminded that the people's shoes didn't wear out in full. Because that was the first time that I'd thought of that, and it's literally written in there in Deuteronomy like that. Just remember, guys, you've been wearing this same pair of shoes for 40 years.
Yeah.
And they haven't worn out.
Same clothes.
40
years.
And they still fit you.
I reckon I can get 7 or 8 out of T-shirts.
I reckon that manner's calorie controlled.
Yeah, you're not getting
so
any
the clothes
bigger.
still fit you 40 years later. So that was a pretty big thing.
Yeah.
The other thing that I had written about in my journal was that because we came into this trip, for me, immediately after my solitude and silence time, my personal trip to Noosa, I found it a bit of a period of adjustment of coming back to, because I had felt like that time in Noosa was just like, there were the double rainbows, there was the kookaburra, there was the sunrise, there was all these miraculous experiences.
Last episode, guys, if you missed it.
Yeah, just feeling like God's closeness so, like, ever present. Like we talk about ever present, like just every moment. And so then here I'm actually adjusting to being back in a position of experiencing God's goodness in community, because I'm no longer just doing what I want when I want it.
Yeah.
And that was an adjustment for me because I'd just literally come off the back. So even though it was still amazing because no kids around and whatever, even
were other
just having
people
to be around you.
Yeah, well, hang on. What about the other couple that was at breakfast with you every morning that wanted us to take
bless.
photos of them? The older couple from Sydney
Melbourne.
who were they immigrants from Cambodia or something, first generation immigrants, and they wanted us to take their photo at the breakfast table every single morning.
They kept singing us out at breakfast every morning.
They come and sit next to us.
I mean, that should be.
Oh, I think it was.
flattered.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, it is an adjustment when you've been on your own. And in the last episode, you were saying that whenever you went to a restaurant, they sat you in the corner or in the kitchen or in the toilet because it was a table for one. So then having to, you're in the resort, you got, with me having a romantic, beautiful breakfast and, holding hands and, kissing over the moonlight. Then this couple comes and sits next to us every single breakfast and then invades our personal space to ask us to take photos of them, and which again I thought was pretty fun, and they were a lovely older couple.
But I was more just.
And it was an adjustment, yeah.
I was more just referring to you because.
Oh right.
Well, just because I had been able to make all my own choices to all my own preferences that previous week, and now here I was, still experiencing God's goodness, still sensing the presence of God, but having to do it in community. And so what I've journaled is that's a lot more like what real life is like. And so I was reflecting on it in my post-sabbatical life, which is going to be in community and is outworked. You experience God's presence and, those miraculous moments around the detail of life and around having to surrender your own preferences in order to be, we have to decide what we're going to do today. And it's not always what I want and when I want it. So that was my reflection about post-sabbatical me, if you like. So we did a couple of other creative things as we referred to.
Yep.
One of them was about church.
Yep, and this is kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of sabbatical purpose.
Yeah.
And I think if you're listening or watching this I think this would be really helpful for people to unpack some of the work we did. So
because some of it was about
church,
ministry and some of it was about family, like our personal goals.
Yeah, definitely. And if you remember back, that's kind of what we went into the sabbatical wanting to seek God on. And so I guess it's cool because you can kind of see the thread from when we started to now, where these are the things we wanted to kind of be able to map out beyond the sabbatical for the next 7 years. And now toward the end of the sabbatical, even though we hadn't necessarily planned to have this as the moment to discuss them, we were there. And then, we're kind of reaching back, not over the top of our experiences back to our original plan. You kind of reach back through all of those experiences and they inform, the decision-making for the future. So I think I would say it's important not to make those big decisions, and we said this earlier, in the first few weeks.
Yeah.
Like let the time do its work. So when you come to the end of the time, you then go, okay, well, none of has been by accident. None of has been just by chance. God's been at work in all of that. And thankfully we got to see God at work in so many different ways, like a kaleidoscope of kind of the picture of God's hand in all of that. And then we come to the real work of, okay, what's church ministry going to look like? What's family going to look like? What's marriage going to look like? And so again, we begin to talk about it, which you'll talk about in a second, I imagine. But we're talking about it informed by, in light of, the last, 5 and a bit weeks, which is pretty cool.
But I was actually feeling a little bit anxious about it because we'd had some conflict, which we've discussed already, in the lead up and at the very beginning of the sabbatical about how to have these conversations, how to frame these conversations. Then we'd kind of gone, like now we can see we'd gone into this middle part where you on your own and then I on my own had leaned into all of this stimulus material about waiting and just not needing to know the answers to all the questions right now. So then because I am a thinker and a problem solver and a strategist, I'm thinking, okay, but when? Because we have to have these conversations at some point. And I don't want it to be an unpleasant experience. Like, how are we going to broach the subject of, like, we need to start to move some of these things to a next step. And so I just want to say that I felt like because we were here in Thailand, we're away from our everyday life, it was a bit empty, as in there wasn't a lot to do. We were already very well rested. We had been through, that conversation at the beginning and then had our own individual experiences with God, that it just, like God was in it, in that it just, some of these conversations just naturally started to happen in a moment.
They did seem to move pretty quickly and pretty simply, didn't they?
Yeah. And it wasn't something that we had to structure and plan and let's have a meeting about this or...
Well, the time, like that's the benefit of having the time. Because there's a bit of a deadline, but it's a long way off.
Yeah.
And when your whole world already feels so slow, which is how we felt in Thailand, it just felt like these things just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Very simply.
And we still had like a good week and a half after, or nearly 2 weeks after Thailand. So we knew we didn't have to do it there, but it just seemed to be like a God flow that we were able to start to have a couple of these conversations. So one of them that just kind of naturally emerged was about our vision theme for church for next year. Do you remember that?
I remember the conversation at the same table that you were sobbing about your computer, losing your journal.
Yeah.
I remember the conversation, and I think you just basically started talking
I pitched
about
something.
Yeah, you basically pitched something to me, and often when you do that, I'll push once you've pitched it. I'm like, okay, but what about this? How will this work? But I don't know. I just felt like it just made sense.
Yeah.
The pitch and.
There was still a bit of back and forth.
That's right.
About it.
We were thinking, well, how do we kind of communicate it in a succinct way? And the work of a vision for a church is, churches pretty much do the same thing, work year in, year out. But you really want to help, people grow in their relationship with Jesus and not just kind of, stay stuck. Yes, maybe we are doing a similar activity, but we're growing in the way that we do it every year. And so we want to build upon our themes every year and not just kind of be, satisfied with, just the level of intimacy with God or maturity of our own lives. And so we want to help people to be drawn into, whatever is their next season in their walk with Jesus. So yes, churches, there is a similar pattern every year, but we do want to cast a vision that's compelling for people and they can see themselves in it and they can see themselves rising to it and they can see the scaffolding, they can see the steps, they can see that, yes, it's achievable, so it's within reach. So all of that. But we also want to make it succinct enough so that you can just say it in a couple of words and people get it. They go, oh, okay, that's helpful. Great, let's go with that. And so, yes, it does, when I say all that to say, churches come up with names for their year. A lot of churches do. And it takes a lot of time because a lot of thought goes into it because we want to help people to grow. Yeah. So it's not just a matter of, just a platitude, a thought, a word. It's a lot of work. So there is backward and forward. So you pitch this idea. I thought it was definitely from God, the idea that you pitched. I thought that's on the money. But then it was like, well, how do we frame it? Because it didn't. The idea was there, but I was like, well, how do we really? It wasn't quite there. Yeah, how do we? So when you say that theme, it just resonates with people. So that was where I came in with a bit of back and forward. It didn't take long. No. And we'll just like try this idea, try that idea, and then bang, it was there. We had a theme for the year, which I think is excellent.
And I saw God in that because, I was trying to present it in a way that sometimes I can be real, like really have my heart in this thing that I think is either a good idea or a God idea. And so then I take it very personally if you don't 100% love it or don't immediately love it. So I was trying to hold it very loosely.
Good.
But I think the sabbatical had helped me to be in a place where I could do that. Yeah. To be okay in myself. And it's that whole idea of coming into things rested and not rushed.
Definitely.
And so I was able to just present it as an idea and not have my entire identity linked to whether you could be in agreement with it or not. And so then when you brought some feedback about, maybe just tweaking it a little bit, I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so there was real unity that came, very quickly. So I guess as we're now reflecting this out loud, I'm thinking, here we are a few weeks down the track and like a post-sabbatical me, I want to remember moments like that so that when I'm pitching ideas or making decisions, big or small, in the future, I remember that if I come into it rested and secure in my own identity, then either it doesn't really matter what the outcome is, or we get the best outcome.
Yeah.
So that was one cool thing that happened.
Very cool. I mean, there's a whole other tangent there which I won't go on, which is kind of the power of rest for both parties and for anyone, like in teams, in leadership, in ministry, that, things just do work better when all parties are rested well, physically, emotionally, spiritually, but that's a whole other tangent. So
I think it's important, though. It's the whole reason for the sabbatical is to practice like we had never experienced that before.
Yeah, like to be self-aware enough to know, okay, I've had 2 or 3 really big days. I'm just not going to be at my best, and it's unfair to expect it from myself and from others, or for me to impose myself upon others whilst I'm unrested. Like you're just not that important, and you're not that good at it, no matter who you are. Jesus can go to sleep in the storm, but he really is the only one that can. And, you need to be rested. Like you need to have the rest so you can face the storms. It's so imperative. So, like, I've found that more so now coming out of the sabbatical, that I've noticed in reflection that the less rested I am, the slower the decisions are, the slower the communication is with others, the slower the team moves, but the
shorter you can be with people.
Yeah, like it just doesn't. So it's a counterintuitive kingdom culture perspective where a rested person that's relying on the power of the Holy Spirit, as opposed to a tired person or a driven person that's injecting their own power into,
or calling adrenaline the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, there's that as well. Just getting high on stimulation. So I'd flag that and say, well, I would rather now, like I think pre-sabbatical I wouldn't have, but I think now post-sabbatical, I'd rather make a mistake in my leadership because I've been too slow than make a mistake in my leadership because I've driven too hard and too fast. Because I probably will make mistakes on either side of those in the future, but I think post-sabbatical I would prefer to be the kind of leader that makes the mistakes on the side of being careful about rest. So, yeah, that's probably a post-sabbatical revelation for me. So if I miss out, or if someone else misses out, or if an opportunity goes begging because we're going to lead from rest instead of lead from rush, well, that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've learnt the last couple of years that it's okay, and in fact it's good for me personally to, if I'm very unrested either physically or emotionally, like feeling really strung out emotionally, I'll take sometimes a half day or full day of sick leave to rest rather than impose myself on other people or, what I'm leading, and bring something that's kind of counterproductive, because sometimes it's counterproductive to be making decisions or to be, leading people when you're doing it out of an empty bucket. So then the other thing, the other cool thing, it's actually, I think, one of my favourite memories of the time in Thailand was, I don't know if you remember this, but it was raining, because it was raining much of the time we were in Thailand. And we were sitting up at one of the bars in the resort with they'd pulled all the plastic sheets down behind us. We're dripping wet with the rain. And we started just doing the actual physical number crunching work of some of our personal financial goals that we'd been dreaming about for the next 7 years. Yeah,
I think we actually started at the table outside of the bar and then it started to rain. And then we went into the bar, and then it got even heavier.
Blowing a gale.
Then they closed the blinds, and we were still getting wet.
Yeah.
Because, rain in Thailand doesn't just come from top to bottom. It comes from left to right and from bottom to top.
That's right.
So you're getting wet, from every angle. And so we're there with we've got books that we've been reading. We had those open on the bar, and we had
I had
the paperwork open, and that's right.
Photocopied all these pages out of this book where you do all of these sums and these calculations to work out what your financial position is and your superannuation and blah, blah. So before we went on the sabbatical,
you just stashed them away in the suitcase.
Used the church photocopier to photocopy all those pages and staple them, and then I'd brought them to Thailand with us. And again, it was just one of those moments where we were like, hey,
we've got the
let's
time.
just do this.
We've got the time for this as well.
What else are we going to do?
All this time. Yeah, so we did that, which was good. And that's been, that was something that we'd wanted to be doing so we could have a bit of an idea of what life would look like over the next 7+ years and what work we need to do to position ourselves financially for our own future and the future of our children. So it was nice that we came away from and again, that was one of those things that just seemed to happen really simply and quickly, where I thought, and this was my anxiety, I was like, oh, this is going to take forever. How are we going to get this right? And how are we going to agree on what we want to, see for ourselves and our kids and all that stuff financially in the future? Like, it's going to be one of those things. We're going to have to keep coming back to it over the next few days or few weeks. But, we mapped it all out, and I reckon within that one sitting, we'd come up with like a strategy.
A vision, yeah.
Yeah, vision, yeah.
Well, a strategy, because the vision was already there, and I'll close with this as we're wrapping up, because we've always, like what we realised, I think, in the lead up to the sabbatical, during the sabbatical, when we started to actually do this number crunching work, was that when we started our marriage, we did have a dream of being able to be in full-time ministry. Mm-hmm. And we had an even further dream that we would be able to do so at some point in the future without it costing a church money.
Yeah.
Being able to self-fund our ministry work through our own personal financial management and good stewardship. And so that's a dream that's kind of come back to life in the last few months pre-sabbatical. And so we'd already been doing a bit of reading. So then we did a bit of work on that. And we, with this long-term vision of, what if in 7 years we were able to completely fund our own time so that the church that we're leading now can employ other people and, we can do some other types of ministry work that we enjoy as well as church leadership, all of that kind of thing. So we start that work. And that was really fun in that moment. We had a really great afternoon doing that. And then on the way home, this is probably my personal story because you were actually asleep.
Is this on the plane?
No, it was on the train.
Oh, I forgot about the train.
So we
Was I
caught
asleep on the train?
Well, for a little bit of it. So
that's right. I was too.
We flew from Phuket to Melbourne and then Melbourne to Sydney.
Oh, that's right. That flight home.
We
oh, my goodness. What was that about? Anyway, so
then we
it's a
were
$4 flight. No wonder, because you went around the world twice to get home.
I'm a good bargain hunter with flights, but sometimes you pay for it in time.
Tired me out. Anyway.
So we're on the train.
Yes.
From Sydney Airport to Morisset Station, where our daughter Zara was coming to pick us up the station.
I remember.
And it's the end of a very long 24 hours and looking forward to seeing our kids, the whole thing. Anyway, so you're asleep.
Yeah.
I just so happen...
I remember.
I just so happen to be thinking about that whole dream that I've got about doing further study, maybe doing a PhD in the next 7 years. And my mind keeps going back to, how do we fund that? Like, how do we fund my time to be able to not have to try and do it on top of a full-time workload, because that was a lot for my master's. So I can only imagine it's more for a PhD. I'm not sure I'm up to that. And I'm back to thinking about how could we fund this? And I'm back to thinking about how to try and hustle, which if you listen to the last episode...
The Noosa episode,
you've got to go back, because I had this moment with this kookaburra when I was thinking about this exact thing, where this kookaburra came and flew down beside me, and I just felt like it was God saying that I didn't have to worry about that right then. So in this moment, you're asleep, I'm on the train, I'm looking out the window, I'm having this exact same thought pattern as I'd had in Noosa about how do we fund the time? How do I get, how is it possible for me to move toward this dream? And literally, as I'm thinking about that, I see a kookaburra on the power line outside the train window, and we approach it and it's looking at me, and I got to have it for the whole time that we kind of approached it and went past this kookaburra. And I just thought it was the same sign again. It was like so clearly God, I believe, telling me that I didn't have to worry about his provision about
good.
that dream.
And I was asleep on the boat in the storm, just like Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you weren't worried about it.
I was rested.
Yeah. So, I think that's a good point to leave that there.
Sounds good.
There was lots of good gold in that, and unexpected things that have happened in that Thailand trip, part of the sabbatical. And next episode, we're going to come and talk about wrapping it all up.
Ooh.
And then we're going to do our post-sabbatical, where are they now?
Wow. Is the next episode our last one?
No, we've got 2 more.
2 more. Oh, good.
So 2 more to go. Thanks for joining us this
All right.
time on Our Sabbatical Story. See you next time.
Bye.